Welcome to another episode of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast. All right, so we're looking for running backs that are potentially going to give you that championship. And this is the sexiest part of your team. This is where the meat and potatoes are of your, if you look at your fantasy team as a meal, this is where it's at. And this is where we want to spend our time. So for me, a running back that jumps out who has already had their bye week, who has a fantastic opportunity, no competition in the backfield, is none other than New York Jets running back, who's still a New York Jet, didn't get traded, Lev Bell. He is currently the running back 23. And I know you're thinking, Mac, why the heck do you want to acquire this guy? I've made a case for Lev Bell 2 episodes ago, a guy that I really wanted to target and get on my team. And I did. I put my money where my mouth is. These guys can attest to it. I picked up Lev Bell in several leagues. He's had a slow start, but so have the Jets. They've had a tough schedule to start the year. They've also been without Sam Darnold, and that just, causes problems for chemistry. And, Lev Bell hasn't really been able to get as many touches as maybe he would have liked. So if you look at the rest of Lev Bell's season, he has one of the easiest strengths of schedules remaining in the Leafs, pre-playoffs for sure. Plays Miami, the Giants, the Redskins, the Raiders, the Bengals, and the Dolphins again. When it comes to playoff weeks 14, 15, 16, we're looking at Dolphins, Ravens, and Steelers. So Ravens, Steelers, not the most ideal, but Lev Bell, if you are in a position where you are, say, 4-4 or 3-5, and you really need to get that piece that might win you week after week, I think when you look at this schedule pre-playoffs, he's going to be super, super strong. And at that point, I won't have any hesitation to play him in the playoffs. Someone I'd be looking to trade Lev Bell for would be Chris Carson of the Seattle Seahawks. He is currently the running back 8. He has been great. He's had his fumbling issues. Rashad Penny did not get traded, so there's still some competition in that backfield. He still has a bye week left in week 11, and he plays Philadelphia, Minnesota, Carolina, and San Francisco, who have all been fairly solid against the run. So I'm looking to pivot off Chris Carson, cash in on that value, and get myself some Lev Bell.
And you might be able to get Le'Veon Plus for Chris Carson.
You might.
Seeing how Carson...
And that's where I would start the trading process, right?
Yeah.
You never want to start too low. I would go, Lev Bell plus whoever, a fringe wide receiver 3, and put Chris Carson up there.
So, Mac, I love the Le'Veon Bell selection, but that is not a secret that Lev has a good schedule. So I'm going to go with a diamond in the rough here, a rookie that has started off the year really slow. But you know what? If you're a fan of the Saturday Morning Snap Fantasy Football Podcast, you know that I predicted that he was going to have a slow start, and this is the time to trade for Philadelphia running back Miles Sanders. He's currently the running back 26, and this past week he had a shoulder injury, but he's set to go this week, and he's got a good playoff schedule as well. They have the Giants, Washington, and Dallas to finish in your championship week. And Miles Sanders has shown that he's been very agile, explosive, can catch out of the backfield. And I get it. It's scary. You're trading for a guy that it's in a timeshare with Jordan Howard. So far, Jordan Howard is the goal line running back. But I'm going to tell you that the skill will be good enough for him to stay on the field, be productive between the 20s. He might lose that goal line work, but I think it's going to be good. And I say roll the dice on Miles Sanders. Who I would trade for Miles Sanders? I'd probably go with a quarterback. I would trade Dak Prescott for Miles Sanders, and you might be able to get Miles Sanders plus for a guy like Dak Prescott, who's the hype is real in Dallas, or a guy like John Brown, a guy that is paired to a inaccurate quarterback, a deep threat. John Brown can give you a great big week, but he can give you a bust. So if you can get a running back that is that they're harder to attain, but you can actually afford to get Miles Sanders right now, especially with that little questionable take beside his name. So that's who I'm going after for my playoff push.
Dak feels like way too much.
Doesn't
it
it,
would
though?
have to be Sanders plus. And it absolutely is. I mean, Dak Prescott is the quarterback 6 already serving a bye week. So he's been fantastic.
Yep.
I do want to let the record show, though, Landon, like, you do this with, like, 40 rookie running backs every single year. So, I mean, you're only bound to hit one of them.
I throw so many darts. I throw so many dodgeballs, if you will. I'm bound to hit a couple targets.
You hit the broadside of a barn with this one. Yeah.
Well, because you said throwing darts, I feel like you were segueing to my pick. But the player I'm selecting was one of the hottest names at the beginning of the season. And I feel like just around now is actually the time that he's starting to look like the player that fantasy owners were hoping he would come out of the gates looking like. And that is Mr. David Montgomery of the Chicago Bears. Now, up until now, if you took him early in the first or second round where he was going, it's been tough sledding. But we started to see just a fantastic performance last week, 27 carries, 135 yards against the Chargers. And you know what? I think this is a turning point for him, and I think the good times are going to keep rolling. Now, when we're looking at his playoff schedule, it's looking pretty good. You're talking about the Dallas Cowboys, the much improved Green Bay Packers, Mac, I'll give you that, and the Kansas City Chiefs. So Chiefs,
I'll just jump
Cowboys,
in real quick, though.
Not really scaring anybody. Jump in.
Well, and the problem here, like, you look, Dallas, Green Bay, KC, Green Bay and Kansas City, as well as Dallas, have been okay defenses, but Green Bay really excels against the pass, but they struggle against the run. They're like bottom 10 in the run. So is KC. So from a passing standpoint, this might not be the best matchup, and that's why we're not going to put up, especially because they have Mitch Trubisky, we're not going to put up Chicago Bears wide receivers against these defenses. However, on the ground, which if the Bears are going to be successful, Montgomery has to be involved at a high rate. Matt Nagy should have figured this out by now. That's why we love them against these defenses.
Well, absolutely, and I think that's one of the most valuable things right now is I think they actually have figured out that their path to success does not run through Mitch Trubisky. It really goes through him handing off. I honestly think that you can get him for almost not a song right now, but I almost pulled off myself last week Tyrell Williams trade for him. And with all the nagging injuries on a guy like Tyrell Williams, if you need a running back, I would totally make that trade. Like I said, I almost pulled it off. It didn't quite come through, and my timing would not have been better. It could not have been better if I pulled it off. But I think somebody like Tyrell Williams, who has had a great season per games played as far as touchdowns, but if he doesn't catch those touchdowns week to week, you're in trouble. So I could see a guy like Tyrell Williams, maybe a guy like Jordan Howard, who has a brutal schedule leading up to the actual playoffs there. If you could flip and end up with a guy like David Montgomery, he may end up being the very high-priced fantasy asset that he was supposed to be just halfway through the season.
Yeah.
Sweet.
I like that take, Scotty. I am going to talk about a couple fairly high up there running backs, I guess. Ish? Ish. Guys who have pretty poor O-lines, but I'm going to go with one, and that's Phillip Lindsay, who I already brought up earlier, and I like this guy for a lot of reasons. So Denver's passing game obviously is a mixed bag. We don't know what to expect from Joe Flacco's replacement in Brandon Allen. Obviously, this coach has to commit more to the run. That is just the reality of when a new quarterback goes in. Also, however, coaching got called out a little bit for not being aggressive last week. And I feel like that should totally make the coaching staff shake their head in Denver. And I feel like they've got to use this dynamic guy, Phillip Lindsay, for what he's worth. He is great in open space, great pass catching back. And when he puts his head down, he will floor people. And I've talked about this guy before. I just really like his playing style. He's got grit, and he's made things work on a team that does have a poor O-line. So if you look at his playoff opponents, he's going to be going against Houston, KC, and Detroit. That's great. And that is just great. That is just sweet, right? That is, you can't beat that. So Yeah, and at the end of the day, I think Phillip Lindsay's about to really take off. He's been playing, like we said, decently, but I feel like he's really about to take off. What do I think he's worth?
Yeah, who would you trade for a guy like Phillip Lindsay?
So this one, I feel like I would want to dump off someone like Derrick Henry.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Don't be too excited, Mackenzie.
Get rid of Derrick Henry at all costs.
Statistically, you probably hate him. No, I'm just kidding. It's not based off stats. I think you just unfairly hate him, Mac.
No, last year I was proven very right by Derrick.
Yeah, well. So here's why I think he could be worth getting rid of. So the passing attack is growing there. We know that Derrick Henry is going to keep getting the ball, but things are a little more exciting than the constant handing off that Mariota's offense did. Their offensive line in Tennessee is awful. So he's not that dynamic of a guy either. He's the type of player that will run straight forward and not really deviate very much from that. The odd time he does break through for big gains, but and his numbers show that he is fairly consistent. But I mean, in his playoff, he does have a Week 11 bye for one thing, and his playoff run it's not terrible, but he does face New Orleans in a championship week. So with those two factors and just his somewhat poor offensive line in front of him, I would be willing to take a risk, get rid of him, and go for Phillip Lindsay.
That is a
just
bold
going back
move.
to the Joe Flacco thing. He was doing his best Michael Scott, like boom roasted on the coordination of the offense, which I thought was great. You'd never see anything out of Joe Flacco. No, he was boom roasted.
And he was good for those pass catchers. He's good for fantasy. As much as we hate on the real life production of Joe Flacco, he was good for the fantasy output.
No doubt. 100%. So let's jump into our wide receivers that we want to target going in. This will be our last positional category we will touch on. I realize that we haven't talked about the teams on bye right now. And so you're not going to see any Falcons, Bengals, Rams, or Saints in this preview or in this strategy, because it's going to be really hard to extract a player or acquire a player who is on bye, because they just don't give you any value as a player, and if you're trying to get them from somebody else, it just might be tough, especially given their situation. So that's why we're staying away from people on a Week 9 bye. But Week 10 is notable. There are 6 teams on bye. It's the only time the whole year where there's been 6 teams on bye. We got the Broncos, Texans, Jags, Patriots, Eagles, and Redskins. A lot of fantasy relevant players there. So a lot of teams are going to get crushed by what we call the bye-pocalypse. The big 6 team bye, and then weeks 11 and 12 are quite crazy as well. You got the Packers and the Seahawks in week 11, and you've got the Cardinals, Chiefs, Chargers, and Vikings in week 12. That is a very, very scary bye week to have, especially in week 12 when you might desperately need a victory. So keep your eyes out for week 10 and 12. Very, very notable weeks.